Hello everyone, it's Mike Levin helping you fight obsolescence. And on the last video, you may remember me talking about network attached storage or network attached server or network application server. Your acronyms may vary, but no matter what they are, we're talking about the home cloud. And you may remember back in the 80s and 90s, how technology at home was mostly about the boxed software from the mall. And then along came the internet and free and open source software and disposable hardware. And we all had to adapt to new realities in which you had to keep reinstalling your software over and over on different hardware you bought, if you can find the original install disk, and if you can find that long software key you had to type in, and if you haven't exceeded the maximum number of installs, and the software is still compatible with whatever new hardware you're on. Plus, why even pay to upgrade if the old versions are still working for you? Why not just pay once and use it forever? And if there's a fuss, why not use FOSS, the free and open source software like GIMP, which is an alternative to Photoshop, and Inkscape as an alternative to Illustrator, Blender as an alternative to your 3D software and your video editing software, and then OpenOffice, which is more commonly LibreOffice today as an alternative to Microsoft Office. This and more made vendors queasy, so they stemmed the tide with Mark It Easy. Pulled out all stops, did what's allowed, and some that's not, we call it cloud. These are not words that the powers that be want me to remind you of. 4 legs good, 2 legs bad. So what's someone like me with a Microsoft brain to do? Well, the answer is to exercise that brain and to make it strong and hard. You wean yourself off the cloud in these baby steps, starting with the biggest offenders, cloud drives like OneDrive, Google Drive, and iCloud files. Do you remember DropBox? The mega vendors were not pleased. New normals come easy when vendors change the hardware defaults. Can you say OneDrive? So, new normals do set in, and behold the new DropBox. Hardware at home. Wait, what? Even though cloud drives are very hot today, the pendulum swings both ways. And the time of the home cloud is upon us. Today's products, the NASs, are actually good enough to satisfy what we call the 80-20 rule. Wait, what? What do you mean the 80-20 rule? Well, it's where you get 80% of the benefit that you're looking for from the first 20% of the effort you're willing to spend, money you're willing to spend. And you get that by using the simple Samba format from these NASs. In other words, Windows Shared Folders, or also known as SMB or CIFS, the Common Internet File Sharing Standard. So anything that you're on your home network can share a common drive at home. For security reasons, these things are locked down and limited to your house. It's possible to extend it further. We're not discussing that today because I don't want to lead you down a path where you have to become a full-scale DevOps or NetAdmin person. So anything in your home can share these drives, except, of course, for the very LXD Linux containers that we've been discussing in the video series leading up to this. No problem. You remember this from the prior videos? where we use the Windows Subsystem for Linux in order to be a bridge between a mapping that exists up on the Windows platform and down on the LXD Linux container platform. You're essentially taking a location which has a Windows home and a WSL home, and then you map it from the WSL home to a container home, right? No problem. You got to wrap your mind around this, but you're basically using the Windows Subsystem for Linux as sort of a mapping bridge between two different locations, all right? So we're going to do almost the same thing, except we need to sprinkle in a little bit of magic Microsoft pixie dust. What is that pixie dust? Well, instead of using the ln command, which you'll recall from here, that's the link command, creating a Unix-style symbolic link, we are going to use the mount command, also a Unix-style command. It has to be done as the super user. And then this here is a very Microsoft thing because it allows you to map one of these Samba paths or UNC. There's a bunch of different names for it, but it's how you address locations on the NAS, and one of the few places where backslashes are actually acceptable, to a location on your Windows Subsystem for Linux, right? So it's a very Microsoft thing. It's one of the gifts given by Microsoft to make the sharing of shared folders on Windows Subsystem for Linux easy. Microsoft gives these gifts. We use it so long as we're still on Windows. And the mapping changes a little bit. Instead of the ln command up here, it's the mount command, right? Except there's one problem, and that problem is persistence, right? Because after a reboot, this location is gone like dust in the wind. So it's Vim time. Easy peasy, 1, 2, 3Z. And if you haven't used Vim yet, now is the time to take up Vim, because we only have to edit one line in one file. Okay, so copy your version of this line into your OS copy buffer's Windows side. What in the world are you talking about, Mike? Well, this is the name of your NAS. When you set up your network attached storage, you have to name it. That's that name. And then this is your WSL user, which I use these fanciful names of Alice and Dorothy and Nell in these locations. And then this is all very standard. So we copy that. And in a very meta process, my video notes here, which used to be sitting right on my desktop, you can see is a shortcut. And that shortcut, if I were to right-click it and show you the properties, you would see the map to letter drive it's going to. That is on my NAS. So I'm loading this off of my NAS now. Perfect example of using the shared cloud location. Much better performance than any of these other things like OneDrive or DropBox. Let me tell you, it's nice to work off of a shared drive. I'll increase that font size so you can see what I'm doing and talking about. And so these are the two commands in the generic pattern that I used in the slideshow over there to the left. And then these are the ones that are used on my system, because I use my names, my name of my NAS, my name of my WSL user, etc. Now the edit I'm talking about is really this edit, and this is the generic pattern, and this is my particular file names here, although this is not the generic pattern. That should actually say NAS name. N-A-S, N-A-M-E, in case I copy paste this to other places for your use. So it's this one we're interested in. But before we get to that edit, we're going to do these two mount commands. So I'll go over here to my next desktop over. And you remember, we're using virtual desktops, right? So I'm on number 3, but you can jump into any one of them, and then you can just move between them left and right, right? Isn't that nice? It's like having all these places to work. So I'm on virtual desktop 3, and I'm going to bring up my terminal. I just double click it, and it drops us into Ubuntu at Drummers. And you'll remember, this is my container, right? If it's not Alice, Nell, or Dorothy, we're actually in a container. These Ubuntu names are what's assigned automatically as the username. This gets automatically assigned, or you choose it when creating the container. All right. So as a before, I'll do an ls, and you can see the only thing that's there is a GitHub directory that I had actually made before to demonstrate our keys. If we do an ls-la, you'll see the SSH location that I did with a similar mapping trick from earlier, but what you won't see is a location called data, okay? But these mappings are not done from inside the container, they're done from outside the container. So I have to exit, and I go back up to nel at diamond age. Okay, I clear screen, clear mind. I do the same before demonstration. In ls, there's absolutely nothing there. ls-la, my invisible files, right? There's a few invisible files, including the mapping of the SSH directory from the last video. Okay. But now what I have to do is I have to execute these two commands, right? The first one will map the NAS location onto my WSL instance. Okay, so no such file or directory. So when you use the mount command, it needs a target. So my target is home nel data. And you'll recall if I do an ls, there's nothing in there. I have to mkdir data. Now it has a target. And I do that command again, and it works. And I do an ls now, and you'll see it has data in there. Clear screen, clear mind. I can cd into data, and I can ls in there, and you can see that's my network shared drive, right? Cloud drive right there. But the story isn't quite done because I've mapped it onto my WSL system, Windows Subsystem for Linux. I now have to map it onto the LXD container that Windows Subsystem from Linux, that sub-Linux is hosting. This is the sub-Linux I'm mapping it to. Copy, paste, enter. Okay, the device is added to Drummers. I could actually exit out and go back in, and it's going to drop me right into Drummers, and I can do an ls here, and you can see there's my data drive. I can cd into the data drive. I can ls from there. There's my drive. It's accessible. This is my home cloud drive, accessible from inside an LXD container, hosted by Windows Subsystem for Linux, on Windows, of course. So this is actually quite big. It's interesting. It's great. I'm so happy it got this far. But remember, I mentioned it's Vim time. It's time to edit a file. If I were to reboot the system, if I were to do a reboot with the operating system, start menu, or if I were to do WSL shutdown and go back into it, all these mappings would be gone. It'd be gone from WSL, so it'd be gone from the LXD container that WSL hosts, right? So we have to make it persistent. We make it persistent from not inside Drummers, but from WSL. So we get back to nel at diamond age here. And now we need to, I'll show you the instructions. You copy this, right? See that? That's the location. So it's clearly a mapping. You're mapping some locations. There's a file system name. Default's a 00. We don't have to understand it all, but it's in your it's in a file called etc/fs tab, which you have to sudo vim in order to edit it. So my copy of that is this one here. It's got my NAS name, my WSL user. Copy. Okay, sudo vim etc/fs tab, right? Sudo vim /etc/fs tab. There's already one thing in there, all right? So I said it's Vim time. This is where most people go wrong. It's easy enough to load a text file into Vim. Now what to do next? You need to be told. There's no way to know this without being told, okay? You need to be indoctrinated into Vim. So let's go back to the instructions and go to the next screen. Okay, press O for insert mode. Now, normally you would press I for insert mode, but O inserts a line below, so watch. I'm in Vim, I hit O on the keyboard. I both go into insert mode, which you can see from down here, which allows you to type, and you can see the cursor is on line 2. Now I'm holding the line I want to paste in my copy buffer, so I just right click. It's in there. Okay, now let's go back to the instructions. I just did the right click to paste from my OS buffer. Now you hit the escape key, then type :WQ. That's for write the file and quit the file. W takes you out of insert mode and back into EX command mode, something like that. And WQ are what you do. The Q actually, is the quit command. So then you hit enter and then you're out of Vim. Ready? So watch. All right. So you have to hit the escape key once. You get out of insert mode. You hit the :WQ, enter. It's saved and you're out of Vim. Now I can exit out of this. All right, and now I'm going to force a true restart of Linux by doing WSL -- shutdown, right? This shuts down WSL, it shuts down the LXD container that's subsequently hosted by it. So all Linux is out of memory right now. We double-click terminal. It's loading one version of Linux and it's loading another version of Linux, and then it's dropping me in at the prompt under Ubuntu at Drummers, LS. There is the data drive, persistence, cloud drive, cloud at home drive. Now to hit home the fact this really is a cloud drive, let me CD into it, LS. And there are my files. One of my files are my video notes that you see over here, right? These are my video notes under Notepad on Windows, right? I'll type foo, Control S to save. I go over here, Vim, V tab. It puts a \n to escape the space, enter. There's my foo, right? Cloud drive shared between any Linux I'm running on my local laptop plus any other device in my whole house. Cloud drive. It's a very popular file sharing format, Samba. So, you're going to find a high level of compatibility with all the devices in your house. You don't need apps from an app store in order to get access to your files. You just use the standard tools built into the operating system. So this is pretty much the end of the video. That is a great success. So let's see what else I have to say. Congratulations. You now know how to use Vim a little bit, right? And you also have a home cloud. And let's test it. I already did test it. That was the foo test. And, it's repetition, right? So it may seem like a small thing, but it is your first step to freeing yourself from the cloud, your need for things like DropBox and OneDrive and Google Drive and iCloud files is dramatically less once you take this modest step. And it sets you up perfectly well for machine learning at home. That's Jeremy Howard, our guru of the non-vendor approach to machine learning and artificial intelligence, coming soon. Thanks for joining me. Don't forget to thumbs up the video, share, make a comment if you have any questions, hit the bell for my live casts and all that happy YouTube stuff. Later, Gators.